Hey, I'm Samir. I'm a health coach and a PhD student based in Johannesburg, South Africa. And today we're going to be reacting to Greta Thunberg's latest video, which links the climate crisis with agriculture. Before we begin, please do take a moment to like and subscribe to this video. It really does help me out. Okay, so before I begin watching this, I think I should say that there are a lot of people who don't like Greta Thunberg for one reason or another. I'm not in that camp. I love Greta Thunberg. I've referred to her in some presentations that I've given. Some of the organizations that she's worked with, so the Sunrise Movement, 350.org, I had the opportunity to partner with some of these organizations over the years as I was a campaigner for global economic justice and global environmental justice. I did that work for a long, long time. I'm still doing that work in my own way. But anyway, just to say that I like Greta Thunberg, I'm really hoping that this video will make a case for the much needed transformation of the agricultural system, and that it will make that case in terms of societal and personal health, human health, and the health of the planet. These things are not incompatible. So I'm super excited about that. I should also say that I myself became vegan in the 1990s. I was vegan for most of the 1990s. And I was vegetarian for many, many years after that. I've only stopped being vegetarian in the past 5 years. And I went vegan primarily for reasons related to climate change. So let's see what she has to say. So I totally agree with this. We are so short-sighted. This is a great start. So I like this, but what I don't like is that this is all she's talking about with regards to health, right? Even in the current crisis, animal-borne diseases account for a very small part of unneeded sort of human illness and human suffering, right? There's much more that can be said about malnutrition, chronic diseases like diabetes, cancer, autoimmune disease, Alzheimer's, and so on. But okay, they're making a short video. I suppose it's all right. Okay, so this may be technically true, but this is a very misleading statistic. Let me explain why. So about 70 to 80% of arable land on the planet cannot be used to produce food for humans. It can only produce grasses, right? These are the grasslands. The soil quality is not such that you can suddenly start growing carrots. Like, it's not going to work, right? So you have a choice with that. Again, this is not a small amount. This is 70 to 80% of all the land that humans farm on the planet. You have a choice. Either you can raise livestock, which will be used to feed humans, or you don't grow anything, right? So the choice that they're saying, they're making it sound as if it's a choice between feeding humans and feeding livestock. The choice is between feeding humans or nothing, right? Feeding humans with livestock or nothing, right? So this is a very misleading statistic. Okay, we do not just clear land to feed animals, right? And in some cases, like for example in the Amazon, we can say, yeah, what's displacing the forest, what's causing deforestation is a conversion to grass to feed cows. That's probably the case in many places in the Amazon. But in the countries that I've worked the most in, so India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia. What are the big things that are destroying the forest? By the way, the forests are completely destroyed in some of those countries that I mentioned. What are the biggest problems? Palm oil, tea, coffee, rice, soy. So just making this about animals, you're missing the point. Like, there's a lot more to these deforestation pressures than just beef. Okay, so the last thing that she just said there, I 100% agree with. We have industrialized life, and that industrialization needs to stop. But where I disagree is that she's putting all the emphasis on animal life. Industrialized plant agriculture is just as bad, and in many ways I think it's worse, right? Totally agreed with this point. Nothing really to add there. Okay, so this figure seems to be completely wrong to me. I'm not going to be doing any fact-checking in this video. This is just a reaction. I'll look up the article when I get a chance, but the vast majority of these kind of figures do not calculate that cows, when properly handled, when properly raised, can sequester carbon. They can be carbon negative, right? Regenerative agriculture is carbon negative if you are using ruminants and if you're doing it right. So you take the carbon from the atmosphere and you put it into the soil through the animal's natural cycle with the grasslands, right? What's more, if you don't have animals in your agriculture, how are you going to get topsoil? there really are only two sources of topsoil, either animal products, so that's manure, that's blood, that's bones, and so on, or if you're not going to use that, it's chemical fertilizers. Chemical fertilizers come from fossil fuels. They come from the fossil fuel companies, which would love to sell us more of them, right? I'm a little bit concerned that Greta Thunberg seems to be giving here an advertisement for fossil fuel companies selling chemical fertilizers, but that's what it looks like. Totally agreed on this point. What I would remind her, though, is that in nature, plants and animals live together in an ecosystem, and within that, different plants play different roles, different animals play different roles, and humans are predators within that. So let me say a bit more about the different roles. The kind of plant that is not really part of our agricultural system are perennial plants. So yeah, you can say, okay, we have some trees and so on, fruits and so on. That's true, but most of our agriculture is around annuals, right? So annuals are things you have to dig up out of the soil every year, and so it's not going to grow again, right? Annuals do not have enough time to really leave nutrients in the soils, and we need more perennials. The kind of grasses that cows and other ruminants eat are perennials. So that's a huge advantage, and perennials will have very deep root systems. They will build up the topsoil. That's super important in an age where we've lost most of the world's topsoil already. Okay, so the number she's citing here actually excludes a lot more than fish, and this is something I really need to emphasize for my vegan brothers and sisters. Like, when we do agriculture, we are killing everything. Lierre Keith and I discussed this in a podcast a little while ago. She calls it ecocide. I think it's a great term, right? Because what are you doing when you're growing monocropped soy or corn or whatever? What you are doing is you are killing everything in the soil, from the smallest bacteria, all the bugs, all the mice, everything, just to grow, row after row of soy or corn or whatever it is. Just because that death of insects, that death of small mammals and so on, the death of owls that may eat the poisoned small mammals, just because that isn't on your plate doesn't mean you don't have to, doesn't mean you can avoid responsibility for it. Something had to die to get the lettuce on your plate, right? It's very important to understand that. Yeah, listen, no disagreement here. Factory farming is awful. I'm not going to defend factory farming. And I love the Spider-Man reference at the end. Power, responsibility, yes, absolutely. Okay, so what I like about this video really is the message. I think it's got a powerful message, an important message. We all have an obligation to do better when it comes to agriculture, 100% agreed, right? What I do not like is the propaganda. So it's not clear to me that if everyone suddenly became vegan tomorrow, we'd do anything but exacerbate all the problems that she's talking about. Fossil fuel emissions would go up. At the moment, just to give the example of fertilizer, fossil fuels produce about 50% of the fertilizer. If we weren't raising animals, that number would have to go to 100%. There's no other choice, right? Furthermore, just from a health perspective, as a health coach, I have lots of ex-vegan clients. I'm ex-vegan myself. I can guarantee you we'd be damaging our collective health. So put COVID aside for a second. Malnutrition in many countries is a very serious issue. And if you take animal foods out of the diet, especially of young people, developing people, you raise the risk of serious problems. Animal foods are the most nutrient-dense foods, right? Some of my friends who are doctors in India would be far more angry at this message than I am, because from their point of view, and doctors have made this case to me before, if everyone went vegan, you're basically telling my patients that their children are going to die, right? That's not something that we want to think about. And in the developed world, cancer, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, these are the main killers. And they're all linked to hyperinsulinemia. They're all linked to high glucose levels. They're all linked to carbohydrate consumption. And if you're telling people to eat more of those staple foods, rices, wheats, pulses, even oats and so on, so-called healthy grains. I mean, I see a lot of people who can't take oats, who it just doesn't suit them. Their blood sugars go out of control. So let me just emphasize that a little bit more. So every day I'm looking at people, many of whom used to be vegan, who are suffering with anxiety, depression, autoimmune diseases. There are women who should be menstruating who aren't having their period, all kinds of problems. I would really be cautious about, especially young people, following this message too closely. You got to think about your health as well, yeah? Returning to the climate issue, framing the issue as plant versus animal-based agriculture is the wrong framing. The right framing, which they sort of touch on in this video, not enough in my opinion, but it's industrial farming versus regenerative farming. That's the right framing. Industrial farming is all about monocropping, right? It's about destruction. You cannot grow row after row of corn or rice or wheat or whatever, and you can't keep, thousands of chickens in a very small house, right? I mean, we can include agriculture in this industrial farming model. You can't do that without an over-reliance on chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and so on, all of which are derived from fossil fuels, or nearly all of which are derived from fossil fuels, right? And in the case of that chicken house, I mean, the amount of damage done from the chicken poop into the water table is insane, right? That's not the way that animals should be raised. But you cannot have regenerative agriculture without animals. At its core, regenerative agriculture is about trying to mimic the natural conditions where plants and animals live side by side and fit humans into that equation in a just and sustainable way. Is that easy? No. Is it possible? Yes, 100% it is possible. There's a lot more I could say about this, like how the video ignored a huge issue of food waste. So anywhere between 30 to 50% of the food we produce on a given day is wasted, right? And that has huge impacts with regard just to sustainability of the system, with regards to all kinds of things. By the way, some of that wasted food, or the food that would otherwise be wasted, is fed to animals. So if you took animals out of the equation, you'd probably increase the amount of food waste, at least unless you had other proposals to deal with it, right? That said, if you're interested in agriculture as part of your strategy to address climate change, I'm 100% with you. I think it has to be done, but plant-based is really not the way. So with that, I'm Samir, your health coach and PhD student based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thanks for listening.